Good morning. Let's try again. So yesterday we looked at relational databases, a database management system, and we introduced the idea of a flat file, and we had a quick recap, or perhaps even the first time we'd seen it, of creating a text file. A flat file with just loads of data with limited structure. So yesterday we wrote it to a file. So it'd be nice to debug that and then change it so that we can load it all in. So let's have a look and see what we've got. Yesterday we created a class called menu item, and it should have had some public attributes and a constructor. It looks like here that we haven't set the attributes to the parameters. So let's see if there's anything else that's dodgy, but I suspect that when we run this, everything's just going to be blank. Hopefully though, there'll be no syntax errors, but I don't think it will write the right stuff to a file. So let's see if we can debug it together. Looks like we've got rid of the syntax errors though, that's good. So the program, I'm expecting it to just say something and then disappear. Remember in the previous topic we talked about code generation, application generation. So we know that when this compiles, it generates some executable code which is going to lurk in the bin debug folder. So this is our project folder. We have a bin folder. Inside bin, there's a different configuration. You might have release or debug. Release is going to be more highly optimized, reducing the debugging information from the exe file. So we have the exe file and we have a text file, but this text file I don't think is going to contain a menu for our cinema system yet. It'll probably just say menu. So let's have a look and see if we can debug it. First of all, we have some iteration here. We want to write each item to the stream writer object. So just imagine this was console, but we're going to use the same interface, the same kind of write line functionality, because it uses polymorphism. It behaves just in the same way as console, but it's actually writing to a file instead. And we want to write this I object. Let's try that and see what happens now. There we go. It presumably has written the text file, but it hasn't done what we want for two reasons. Number one, it doesn't know how to display a menu item properly. And number two, I don't think it's set the data properly. So first of all, let's tell it how to display it properly, as in public override the toString function. Don't want to return the base class implementation of toString. I would like to override that, please. So what can we say? So what do we want to say? We want to say the name of the menu item, costs, and then we'll put a pound sign and the cost. And then how many calories? We'll say whether or not it's suitable for vegetarians. Oh, we were going to lay it out as a CSV file, weren't we? So how many attributes have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can define your own structure when you're writing it. Let's have the name, the cost, the number of calories, whether or not it's vegetarian, and whether or not it is vegan. That should hopefully write some more meaningful data rather than just displaying the name of the class in the text file. But I don't think that data will be set to what we want it to be yet, because the constructor hasn't been implemented properly. There we go, it's just generic data here. Even though the main program passes this data into the constructor doesn't do anything with it yet. So let's make a deliberate mistake here and then discuss why it's wrong. So the order is really important here. This means the current instance of this class, and this dot and then an attribute name means set the attribute. If you have a parameter with the same name as an attribute, the parameter takes priority, so you don't need to do this. So here we want to set the attribute, to the parameter. The parameter is the value that comes in, the attribute is the value associated with a particular instance of the class. And we need to do that for all of them. So this.cost equals cost, this.calories equals calories. Come on, autocomplete, you can do it. Set the vegetarian options and the vegan options. And now, hopefully, when we run it, it should read the data in. So you can control whatever structure it is, but it's a flat file. It's really difficult to search and find the information if we do it this way, but it's fine for simple programs or unstructured data. There is some structure here. They are still kind of records, but it's not very easy. The final thing we did at the end of the last lesson was just say, well, a CSV file is just a text file, but it opens in Excel or a spreadsheet program. So there is no difference. It's still exactly the same. And you can open it still in a text editor and it will look identical. But that CSV tells your operating system that it's structured so that we can open it in a spreadsheet program and it just formats it into cells, rows, records, etc. So we discussed at the end of the last lesson, there we go. Discussed at the end of the last lesson, well, what would happen if we want to have a more complex database? So things like, rather than just snacks in a cinema, what about films and bookings and things like that? It's going to be really hard to do that in one file. So that's what we want to move on to. But first, we said it would be nice to read the data from a file. So we should probably refactor our program. So let's put a main menu in. So we're trying to make a main menu now where you can type in 1 to read, 2 to write, and 3 to exit. So I'll get started and then I'll give you a couple of minutes to make it work. Help, wrong keyboard layout. We want a main menu. I would like a loop that happens forever, and I would like 2 options. 1, write to file. And then maybe 2 will be read from file, which we haven't implemented yet. You can have Q for quit. And if you get that far, you can add in an optional display data on screen. And add new menu item. And then maybe remove all menu items. So number 3, 4, and 5 are optional, but I'd like you to do all of the others, please. Think about what programming building blocks you're going to need. You're going to need some iteration in there, so that we have a loop that goes round and round and round. Make it so that you can write to a file, which is what you've got already. Put the structures in place so that you can read from file, but we'll go through how to actually implement that later. And if you get time, you can do 3, 4, and 5. So let's have a look and see how we could do this. I want this to repeat multiple times. So let's have a Boolean flag that says running, and we'll set it to true at the beginning so that we can say while we want to run, all of this gubbins can happen. Then we want to let the user type something in, string input or string choice equal dot read out line. Then we can have our if statements. So rather than lots of ifs, I'm going to have a switch based on what the user types in. If the user types in Q, then running can be set to false. And then you just need the same kind of thing for case 1. file. And rather than putting all of our code in with the user interface, it'd be nice to do a bit of decomposition. So if we can say something like, what was one write to file, which doesn't work yet because we haven't got a write to file. So Alt-Enter, Visual Studio will hopefully be clever enough to implement that method for us. Generate method write to file. Yeah, there we go. It's just going to put a static void write to file, which throws an exception that says we haven't implemented it yet. Well, obviously, because we haven't written it yet. But it's down here. So there it is. I don't actually want all of this code to be in here because I don't want to write just this. I'd like to make a new menu item at the start of the program. So that then needs to be up here, and it needs to be static so that the other procedures can access it. File name can't be accessed because that needs to be a global variable taken out of main and made static so that we can access it without an instance of the class called program. And then I don't want to add all of these every time I write to it. I just want to add them at the start. So the program runs, I'm going to add some stuff in, and then show the main menu, and then I should be able to choose to write to a file. There we go. If you're watching this at home, you can pause and try and implement the rest now. So the next stage then is to make it so that we can read from a file as well. We'll put in the user interface option, so we can type in a 2, read from a file, which again doesn't work yet. This time I'll write it, we'll write it ourselves rather than get Visual Studio to do it. It needs to be static so that we can run it without an instance of the class we're in. It doesn't return anything, read from file. So let's think what it actually should do. I want it to be able to open the file, so let's do some decomposition. Open the file, read each line, add data to the list. So we'll use the write to file as an example, but this time we're not going to use a stream writer, we'll use a stream reader. We'll use the same global variable called file name. You could customize it so that the user types it in yourself. And then we'll use that just like, like we would have used console.readLine. There it is. So I guess we just want to keep doing that whilst there's more to read. So let's see, while reader dot, is there an EOF or end of stream? There we go. Notice it doesn't say end of file because it doesn't actually know that it is a file. It could be a memory stream just from RAM, or it could be over the network. So whilst we are not at the end of the stream, we want to read something. And for now, we'll just write it. We're not processing it at the moment, we're just displaying it. Let's see if it works. So last topic, we talked about compiling. So this is what it's doing in the background. It does your lexical analysis, syntax analysis, and it's failed the syntax analysis because, why? Oh, because I've forgotten to close the curly brace. So remember, we do our lexical analysis, we strip out the comments and the white space, and we generate a symbol table, and we split it up into tokens. And when it split it up into tokens, it passes it on to the syntax analysis, and it didn't find the token it was looking for, and that token was this one in here. So you're beginning to understand more and more as the topics come together, which is good. Let's try again. Will it get past the syntax analysis? to get to the code generation, and then linker and loader, and then execute. Great, so let's read from a file, and it has read each line in, and we can see it in here, fab. So the way I've done it, I've got a line first, which is the title, and then I've got all the things in this order. So I'm going to check that the first line is menu as a little bit of validation. So let's see, string line equals reader.readline. I'm going to do this outside of the loop, which is going to cause problems inside the loop because we've got two variables with the same name here. So I just don't want to initialize it a second time. At this point, I should be able to do some validation. So if line is equal to menu, that's what I put on the first line, then I can say we've found a valid file. Otherwise, we'll ignore it. And then this bit that actually reads the rest of the file will only happen conditionally now if we find the first line. So that's because when I wrote it, I just put a line in here that said menu first before I put each item that's in our cinema menu. Right, so now I want to do these bits that we did in decomposition. Well, we've already read each line. What we haven't done is understand each line. So let's think what each line is. It was data, comma, data, comma, data, comma, etc. So let's do data, the line, dot split. So what is line? Line is a string. A string is an instance of the string class, which has some methods which we can call. And one of the methods is split, which says whenever we have a comma or any particular character, you can split it and return an array of strings. What should we call them? Let's call them tokens in line with what we did in the last topic. So we're going to have an array of tokens where the first value will be, do I still have the file open? Let's have a look. I know I'm opening the text file, it's just easier to see because it's the same data. The first token is going to be the name, and then the price, and then the calories, and then I can't remember which way around it is. We'll check in a bit, but vegetarian and vegan, something like that. Okay. So let's make a new menu item. When we do that, we have a constructor. We don't have a constructor that doesn't accept any arguments. We've only got a constructor that has to specify the name, the cost, the calories, and then optionally vegetarian and vegan. But that's nice because we've got that now. We've got the first value in our list of tokens is the name. Second value in our list of tokens is going to be the cost, which will have an error at the moment because we've got an array of strings and that expects to be a double. And then the vegan, there we go. So the string one works perfectly, but this is expecting a double, whereas we're giving it a string. So we just need to cast it to the right data type. Double dot pass, which means give it a string and hope for the best. What's the next one? Control Shift Space int. So int.pass. Now I know that this could well fail at any point because if we try and pass something that isn't valid, it's going to throw an error. And when you're doing your project, you should validate all data from a file and all data from the user to check and see if it's sensible. So doing it all on one line is a bad idea. Oh, it's not int.pass, is it? This is a Boolean to say, is it vegetarian friendly? But It's great. It just has the same parse method. So can we add it to the data structure? Let's see. The list is called menu. We can add the item we've just created, and we may as well display it as well. Let's see if that works. No, it hasn't worked. I think we need to be explicit that we convert this to a string. Parse tokens. Oh dear. Forgot to put the parentheses, the brackets. We're not American. All right, so let's try and read from the file. It's detected a valid file. It's read it. I don't know why we're displaying it twice. Is that because we've got an extra .read line in there? Yeah, we've got a console.read line in here somewhere. Sorry, console.write line. Don't need that. So it does work. The extension for you is to show a friendly message if you get invalid data. For example, if I let's open the actual file, the CSV. If I have some missing data, or I put it in the wrong format, my whole program is going to crash. A moment, because it's expecting a Boolean. So if I say nachos is definitely not vegetarian friendly, logically it makes sense. Well, nachos probably are vegetarian friendly, but you know what I mean. But I don't think our program's going to cope with that. Excel's going to be clever and try and save it as an Excel file rather than a CSV. Just do what you're told to, Excel, please. Yes, that's why I chose to save it over the top of it the first time. There we go. Right, so I'm expecting it to crash at the moment because bool.parse will not be able to convert the definitely not into a true or false. Your job is to try and handle that without crashing. Here we go, it's going to crash. Invalid file detected, not processing data. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. Oh, is that because the CSV didn't have a thing at the top? I know. Not sure. So we've just been discussing the pros and cons of doing it this way. This is really useful if you've just got simple data that you want to shove in a file, but it's very restrictive, as in you can only have a single file for a single table. If you want a complex database where you've got lots of links between data, like bookings by people, people who can buy products, products that have prices that might change, different locations of different cinemas, that does not work well in a flat file. So you want a database management system which can handle all of those relationships, deal with all of the reading and writing from a file. One thing we haven't mentioned is, why do we want to read and write from a file anyway? Well, it's because we want persistent storage. We want to be able to do stuff in a program and have that data still there when we run the program next time. So we can't just have variables in memory. It's got to be stored somewhere.